We are seeing more of the catastrophic damage Ian is causing across the state.
More than 2.5 million people are currently without power, and millions are feeling the impact of the devastating storm. Ian made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane, packing 150-mile-per-hour winds on Wednesday afternoon. It's ripped roofs off of buildings, turned roads into rivers, and decimated some of the state's critical infrastructure.
Recovery efforts are underway across the state. Severe flooding and life-threatening storm surges are bearing down on parts of Florida's southwest coast. And although the storm has largely passed, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says more flooding is expected.
The amount of water that's been rising and will likely continue to rise today, even as the storm is passing, is basically a 500-year flood event. This storm is having broad impacts across the state, and some of the flooding you're going to see in areas hundreds of miles from where this made landfall are going to set records, and that's going to obviously be things that that will need to be responded to.
Let's bring in CBS News correspondent Kris Van Cleave. He is traveling along the Florida coast, surveying the damage. Kris, behind you, it's obviously a mess. Tell us what's the scene on the ground there now.
Well, we've just gotten into Fort Myers, came across the bridge, so we're looking at downtown. The very first thing that you see is this marina as we're coming in. And obviously there are boats in places there should not be boats. As Tony opens up, you can see not only are boats off their moorings and on their sides, but they are well inland here. So we look out towards the water. That's where the boats all started, out there in the river. And they were pushed by the fury of Ian off their moors, into the dock, and in some cases, about a half a block onto land. You have sailboats on their side. You have large yacht-type boats also just thrown about. So this is the first taste we're getting. And I tell you, as we're driving in, the first sign that you were really getting into a situation where the winds were ferocious. There's a motorboat sitting in the middle of the road on 41 as you come in here to go over the bridge. If we pan this way, Tony, you can clearly see this was part of the dock. This should be out in the river. This boat is on land. And as we keep coming, you're going to see over here, you have boats that are hundreds of feet from the water. So you had a storm that was powerful enough to pick up large boats, yacht-sized boats, and throw them to land. And we know that the amount of surge that came through here, 7 feet, 10 feet of ocean of water, moving all of this debris onto land, that means it also went into homes. That means it went into businesses. So this is our first taste getting into Fort Myers of the kind of destruction that we are hearing about throughout Lee County, the home to Fort Myers. So as we're able to get driving around here, we're going to get a better sense. But our first look. This was a major storm. Power is out here, as you can imagine. Cell phone service is very spotty. There are a lot of people out and about on the roads. Traffic lights are not working. So that creates an obstacle for first responders, for power crews. As people are out, some are surveying the damage to their property, and some are playing disaster tourist, which is certainly not what authorities want here.
Yeah.
But this was clearly a nasty, awful storm, and we're just getting our first look at it here as we're getting to town.
I mean, Kris, that devastation around you is just, incredible to behold. I can't imagine what it must be like for the people to wake up there. Which brings me to my question. I know a lot of us went to sleep last night not feeling very well, feeling very uneasy about what was going to happen in Florida overnight when, the lights were out, right? Can you tell us what it was like riding out the worst of the hurricane? We know you were up in Tampa. You weren't there in Fort Myers, but what was last night like?
Yeah, I mean, for us in Tampa, it doesn't compare to the hell that people would have gone through down here. You had howling winds, you had driving rain, we had concerns about flooding, power was out to hundreds of thousands of people up there. As we were coming in here, when we last talked to Anne Marie and Vlad about an hour ago, we pulled into a small neighborhood, and as we were going house by house, some houses were untouched, others were obliterated. And I suspect we're going to see more and more of that as we get further into Fort Myers, because what they experienced, a Category 4, almost a Category 5 storm coming ashore, bringing those 155-mile-an-hour sustained winds, slamming into the barrier islands and then into Fort Myers proper. And then you had this wall of water that came through here. Water, enough water to pick these giant boats up and throw them like toys a block inland. So this could only be described as a night from hell for the folks in Fort Myers and Lee County and Port Charlotte up the road.
Kris, you mentioned the power being out, cell service being out. Any sense of when all of that will be restored? Because for the people who managed to weather the storm, now they're looking at some difficulties ahead. And can you tell us anything more about emergency crews? Are they now fully activated?
Yeah, so the winds are dying down. We saw a Coast Guard helicopter doing a low pass over Fort Myers. That was a damage survey, almost certainly, trying to get a sense of and a grasp of how bad this was. Because, when the sun came up today, even the first responders here in Lee County didn't know the scope of the damage. By now, as we're at the middle of the day, they've had helicopters in the air. They're going to have a sense for that. We passed a lot of power crews driving down here. So, look, the repair effort is underway in places like Tampa, in Bradenton, some of the areas that were more on the periphery that may have taken a hit. Power's going to come back faster there. There are going to be parts of Lee County where they're going to have to rebuild that power infrastructure. That is not a quick process. That's not going to be measured in hours. That's probably going to be measured in days. So there are going to be people in communities like this one who may not see power for several days. There are other people that should get it back later today. Fortunately, it is not oppressively hot. And as we've seen after some hurricanes, the heat and humidity ratchet up. That is not the case today. So at least you're not suffering through oppressive temperatures. But certainly people are going to want to get their lights back on. And crews are working. There are 27,000 plus repair crews from surrounding states and across Florida that are at work now trying to get the lights back on.
The smallest of blessings.
Yeah.
Kris, glad that you and Tony are safe. Obviously, we are thinking of everybody there in the Fort Myers area. Thank you.